The pristine halls of the Galactic Embassy's security wing gleamed under artificial lighting, their polished surfaces reflecting the tension in the air. Lyra Novak straightened her formal diplomatic attire, a sleek navy suit that marked her as Earth's newest representative to the Galactic Council. The weight of the data crystal in her inner pocket felt heavier with each step toward the security checkpoint. Jarek stood at his post, his iridescent scales shifting colors under the bright lights as he observed the approaching human. As chief of security for the Atlaxi delegation, he had developed a reputation for being thorough, perhaps excessively so. His species' natural ability to detect biochemical changes made him particularly effective at his job, though it often unnerved other species. Identification and purpose, he stated, his multifaceted eyes scanning Lyra's features. His voice carried the distinctive harmonic undertone of the Atlaxi, a sound that seemed to resonate in the chest of anyone who heard it. Lyra Novak, Earth Diplomatic Corps, she replied, presenting her credentials. I'm here for the emergency session regarding the Outer Rim dispute. The scanner hummed to life as she stepped through, and immediately began flashing red. Jarek's scales shifted to a deep purple, a sign of suspicion among his kind. The scanner detected anomalous energy signatures. Ambassador Novak, you'll need to undergo a thorough security screening. Lyra's heart rate quickened. She knew this might happen. Earth's encryption technology often triggered alien security systems. Of course, though I should inform you that my diplomatic status requires. Your diplomatic status, Jarek interrupted smoothly, does not override security protocols during a Level 1 alert. Please follow me to the private screening room. The screening room was clinically sterile, its walls lined with more sophisticated scanning equipment than the checkpoint. Jarek activated the privacy protocols, the door sealing with a soft hiss. You'll need to remove your outer garments, he stated matter-of-factly. The scanner needs direct access to analyze any potential threats. Lyra's cheeks flushed, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. I understand protocol, Chief Jarek, but surely there's a less invasive method. Not one that guarantees security, he replied, his scales now shifting through patterns of blue and green, colors Lyra couldn't interpret. The recent attacks on diplomatic installations have forced us to enhance our measures. As Lyra began removing her jacket, she noticed Jarek's scales rippling with an unusual pattern. Was that discomfort? Embarrassment? The Atlaxi were known for their strict adherence to duty, but also for their deeply private nature. This situation had to be as uncomfortable for him as it was for her. The data crystal, she said, carefully removing it from her jacket pocket. It's carrying encrypted diplomatic communications. That's probably what triggered your scanners. Jarek took the crystal, his scaled fingers brushing against her hand. The contact sent an unexpected shiver through both of them. His scales flickered rapidly, a reaction Lyra had never seen before. The encryption signature is unusual, he noted, his harmonics slightly off-key. Not standard Earth protocols. Standing there in her undergarments, Lyra felt strangely vulnerable yet determined. Because it's not just Earth protocols. It's a new hybrid system, combining Earth encryption with Atlaxi quantum patterns, part of a joint security initiative that's supposed to be announced at today's session. Jarek's scales shifted to a brilliant gold, surprise, perhaps. You're carrying prototype diplomatic technology without prior security clearance. The clearance was supposed to be waiting for me, Lyra explained, watching his reactions carefully. Unless someone wanted it to be delayed, wanted this exact situation to occur. The security chief's posture changed subtly. She could see his quick mind working through the implications. If someone had deliberately interfered with her security clearance, forcing this inspection, they might be hoping to create a diplomatic incident. Or worse, hoping to get access to the prototype through standard security protocols. Get dressed, Ambassador, Jarek said suddenly, his scales settling into a deep blue. We need to handle this carefully. He turned away to give her privacy, but she caught the lingering flicker of colors across his scales. Whatever was happening between them, it went beyond simple security protocols. As Lyra redressed, she found herself studying his profile, the way his scales caught the light, the rigid posture that spoke of years of discipline. There was something compelling about him, beyond the exotic appearance of his species, a sense of integrity, perhaps, or the way he'd immediately understood the larger implications of the situation. "Chief Xerix," she said, adjusting her jacket, "I believe we both know this inspection was meant to be more than routine. Perhaps we should discuss this, off the record." His scales rippled with what might have been amusement. "Ambassador Novik, are you suggesting we violate security protocols?" "I'm suggesting we follow them very carefully, but perhaps not in the way someone was hoping we would." She smiled, seeing his scales shift to an intrigued pattern. After all, sometimes the best way to handle a diplomatic incident is to avoid it entirely. Xerix considered her for a moment, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the room's bright lighting. "The Embassy Cafe on level 3 has minimal surveillance. I take my break there in 20 minutes. "What a coincidence," Lyra replied, straightening her collar. "I was just thinking I could use some coffee before the session." As she left the security checkpoint, credentials cleared and data crystal secure, Lyra couldn't help but feel that this unexpected encounter had set something larger in motion. In the reflection of the polished walls, she caught a glimpse of Xerix watching her leave, his scales shimmering with colors she was beginning to think might mean more than simple security concerns. The real question was who had wanted this inspection to happen, and why. Something told her that she and the intriguing security chief would soon find out. The Embassy Cafe hummed with the quiet conversations of various species, its broad windows offering a spectacular view of the space station's curved horizon. Lyra sat at a corner table, her coffee untouched, watching the strange dance of ships moving through the docking patterns outside. Her fingers absently traced the edge of her data crystal, mind racing through the implications of the morning's events. Xerix appeared precisely on schedule, his scales now a subdued gray that seemed designed not to draw attention. He carried no drink. Atlaxi didn't consume stimulants, but he moved with the casual air of someone taking a routine break. "The cafe systems are experiencing minor technical difficulties," he said quietly as he sat down. "Audio surveillance will be offline for approximately 18 minutes. Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Convenient malfunctions. I find it useful to maintain certain contingencies." His scales flickered briefly with what she was beginning to recognize as amusement, particularly when dealing with sensitive diplomatic matters, like unauthorized security screenings of Earth diplomats. She kept her tone light, but watched his reaction carefully. "Ambassador, in the past 3 weeks, there have been 16 attempts to breach embassy security. Each one has targeted diplomatic communications, specifically those involving joint species initiatives." His scales darkened. "Your inspection this morning was the first to involve prototype hybrid encryption." Lyra leaned forward slightly. "Someone's trying to access the new security protocols before they're announced." "Someone," Xerix agreed, "who has enough influence to manipulate diplomatic clearances and security schedules." His multifaceted eyes fixed on hers. "Tell me, Ambassador, who knew you would be carrying that crystal today?" "Only 3 people. Myself, Earth's chief diplomatic officer, and—" She paused, realizing something. "And Delegate Venn from your own diplomatic corps. He's the one who suggested I bring the prototype today." Xerix's scales rippled with a pattern she hadn't seen before. Concern, perhaps, or confirmation of suspicion. "Delegate Venn has been vocal about his opposition to closer ties with Earth. He believes your species advances too quickly, takes too many risks. And now he knows about our hybrid encryption system," Lyra said grimly. "A system that combines Earth's adaptive algorithms with Atlaxi quantum patterns. Proof that our species can work together effectively. A fact some would prefer to keep quiet." Xerix's voice carried a deeper harmonic than usual. "The scanner readings from your inspection. They weren't just analyzing the crystal. They were trying to copy its contents." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. Then the security screening wasn't just about creating a diplomatic incident. They needed me to remove the crystal, to get it away from any protective shielding I might have been carrying. Precisely. Jerex's scales shifted through patterns of deep purple and blue. But they didn't expect you to understand Atlaxi color patterns well enough to recognize my warning. Warning? Lyra thought back to the inspection. The unusual ripple of colors across his scales. When you took the crystal, that pattern wasn't discomfort, was it? You were trying to tell me something was wrong. Your perception is impressive for a human. Was that admiration in his harmonics? Most species never bother to learn our color language. They find it too complex, too alien. I find it fascinating, Lyra admitted, then caught herself. This wasn't the time for personal observations, but we have a more immediate problem. The emergency session starts in 2 hours, and Delegate Venn will expect me to hand over the crystal for official verification before the announcement. Jerex's scales rippled with determination. Then we have 2 hours to prove his involvement and prevent a major security breach. He hesitated, then added, "This may require bending several diplomatic protocols." "I'm starting to think," Lyra said with a slight smile, "that some protocols are meant to be bent." She pulled out her secure tablet, keeping it below table level. "I have access to Earth's diplomatic archives. If we cross-reference Venn's voting record on interspecies initiatives with the security breach attempts, and I can access the embassy's security logs through my personal encryption." Jerex's scales had taken on an excited sheen. If Venn is behind this, he would have needed to use his diplomatic override codes to alter the security schedules. They worked in focused silence for several minutes, their tablets occasionally synchronizing data with soft chimes. Lyra found herself increasingly aware of Jerex's presence, the subtle shifts of his scales, the graceful efficiency of his movements. She wondered if his species' emotional sensitivity allowed him to detect her growing attraction. "Here," she said suddenly, keeping her voice low. 3 months ago, Venn accessed classified files about Earth's quantum computing research. The same day, there was a routine security inspection of the Earth science delegation. Cross-referencing with security logs, Jerex confirmed, his scales brightening. He used his override codes to access the scanner systems directly, just like this morning. He looked up at her, his harmonics carrying a note of respect. "We have him." "Not quite," Lyra cautioned. "This is circumstantial. We need to catch him actively attempting to copy the crystal's data." She tapped her tablet thoughtfully. "Unless, what if we gave him exactly what he wants?" Jerex's scales rippled with curiosity. "You have a plan." "A risky one," she admitted, "but sometimes the best way to expose a hidden agenda is to play right into it. How do you feel about another security inspection?" His scales flickered with what she now recognized as amusement mixed with admiration. "Ambassador Novak, I believe you're suggesting we create our own diplomatic incident." "Sometimes," she replied, allowing herself a small smile. "The most diplomatic solution is the least diplomatic approach." She glanced at her tablet's chronometer. "We have 90 minutes. Shall we discuss the details?" As they bent their heads together, planning in quiet whispers, Lyra couldn't help but notice how their fingers occasionally brushed as they shared data between their devices. Each contact sent a small thrill through her, and she could have sworn she saw Jerex's scales shimmer with matching excitement. Whatever happened in the next 2 hours would either expose a conspiracy or create an interstellar incident, possibly both. But looking at her unlikely ally, Lyra found herself looking forward to bending a few more protocols with the fascinating Atlaxi security chief. The secondary security checkpoint was quieter than the main entrance, its minimal staffing perfect for their plan. Lyra approached with purposeful steps, the modified data crystal secure in her jacket pocket. Jerex stood at attention, his scales a professional shade of blue-gray, but she caught the subtle ripple of anticipation in their patterns. "Identification and purpose," he announced formally, though his harmonics carried a hidden note she was learning to recognize. "Lyra Novak," Earth Diplomatic Corps, she replied, presenting her credentials. I'm afraid I received a notification about irregularities in my morning screening. Something about incomplete scans. Right on cue, the scanner flashed red as she passed through. In the observation room above, she knew Delegate Venn would be watching, expecting his plan to unfold perfectly. Please proceed to the private screening room, Jerex instructed, his scales shifting through the predetermined patterns they had rehearsed. To anyone watching, it would appear he was merely following protocol. The screening room looked identical to the one from their morning encounter, but they had made subtle modifications to its scanning systems. As the door sealed behind them, Lyra removed her jacket without prompting. "The crystal," she said, loud enough for the observation room's audio pickups. "I assume you'll need to scan it separately again." "Standard protocol," Jerex confirmed, taking the crystal. His scales flickered briefly. 3 quick pulses of gold. Their signal that Venn had taken the bait, attempting to access the scanner's data stream. Lyra continued removing her outer garments, playing her part perfectly. "I must say, Chief Jerex, these repeated screenings seem excessive, almost as if someone wants to create a diplomatic incident. I assure you, Ambassador, everything is being done according to protocol." His scales rippled with hidden meaning. Venn was downloading the crystal's data, exactly as they planned. The crystal contained a sophisticated trap, designed by Earth's best cryptographers and enhanced with Atlaxi quantum patterns. The moment anyone attempted to copy its contents, it would not only corrupt the stolen data but trace the attempt back to its source. A sudden alarm blared through the embassy's communication system. "Security breach detected in Diplomatic Sector 7. An automated voice announced, "All personnel, implement lockdown procedures." Lyra and Jerex exchanged quick glances. This wasn't part of their plan. "Get dressed," Jerex ordered, his scales shifting to alert patterns. "Something's wrong. The crystal's encryption triggered additional security protocols we didn't anticipate." The lights flickered and died, replaced by the red glow of emergency lighting. Lyra quickly pulled her clothes back on, her diplomatic training kicking in. Could Venn have detected the trap? No, this is something else. Jerex's scales had taken on a dark, worried pattern. "The embassy's main security grid is going dark. Someone's using our little distraction as cover for a larger breach." The building shuddered, and the distant sound of explosions echoed through the corridors. Lyra's eyes widened. "We didn't just expose Venn's plan. We provided the perfect opportunity for someone to strike the embassy while security was focused on us." Jerex moved to the door, his scales now a fierce combination of protective and determined patterns. The observation room. If Venn was working with others, he might have additional information. He looked at Lyra. "I know you have combat training. Earth diplomats are required to maintain certain skills, yes?" She smiled grimly, pulling a compact laser pistol from her boot, one that had conveniently avoided detection during their staged screening. "Let's just say Earth believes in thorough diplomatic preparation." They moved through the darkened corridors with practiced efficiency, Jerex's natural night vision complementing Lyra's tactical training. The observation room's door was sealed, but Jerex's security override still functioned. Inside, they found Venn unconscious, slumped over the control panel. "He's alive," Jerex confirmed, his scales rippling with diagnostic patterns. Stunned. "But look at this." The screen showed a series of encoded transmissions, actively sending embassy security codes to an unknown recipient. Lyra quickly accessed the computer, her fingers flying over the interface. "These aren't just security codes. They're downloading the entire diplomatic database. Everything about Earth Atlaxi joint projects, including the real hybrid encryption protocols," Jerex added, his harmonics grim. "We thought Venn was acting alone, but he was just the distraction. While we focused on catching him, someone else was using his access to mask their own intrusion." Lyra finished. She glanced at the unconscious delegate. They needed his codes, but they didn't trust him to keep quiet afterward. Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. Jerex's scales shifted to a determined pattern she hadn't seen before. We have two choices. We can follow protocol, evacuate with the other diplomats. Or we can find out who's really behind this and stop them, Lyra said, checking her weapons charge. I vote for option 2. Breaking protocol again, Ambassador. His scales flickered with what she now definitely recognized as affection mixed with admiration. Well, Chief Jerex, you did say I had an impressive understanding of Atlaxi patterns. She moved to the door, weapon ready. And right now, your scales are telling me you want to hunt down these attackers as much as I do. Your perception continues to impress, he admitted, falling into step beside her. Though I should warn you, this will likely end any chance of a conventional diplomatic career. Lyra felt a smile tug at her lips despite the danger. Somehow, I think my future diplomatic endeavors were destined to be unconventional the moment I met you. Together, they moved deeper into the darkened embassy, following the trail of the real conspirators. Their forced security inspection had unintentionally started this crisis, but their growing trust in each other might be the only thing that could end it. The embassy's sub-level corridors echoed with distant alarms as Lyra and Jerex tracked the intruders through the darkened passageways. Emergency lighting cast everything in a crimson glow that made Jerex's scales appear to shimmer like liquid fire. The data transfer is being routed through the quantum communications hub, Lyra whispered, checking her tablet's encrypted display. 3 levels down, where the embassy's most sensitive transmissions are handled, Jerex confirmed, his scales shifting through patterns of concern. Also where we keep the backup servers for all diplomatic records. They paused at an intersection, hearing footsteps echo from multiple directions. Jerex pulled Lyra into a maintenance alcove, his scales darkening to match the shadows. The close quarters brought them chest to chest, and Lyra found herself acutely aware of the subtle heat radiating from his scaled skin. 4 hostiles, he murmured, his harmonics vibrating through her. Military-grade stealth suits, not common mercenaries. Someone with serious backing, Lyra agreed, trying to focus on the threat rather than their proximity. The kind of resources only major powers have access to. The footsteps passed their hiding spot, and Lyra caught glimpses of advanced tech that confirmed their suspicions. The attackers moved with professional precision, their gear far beyond what common criminals could acquire. Think about it, she whispered once the corridor was clear. Who would benefit most from disrupting Earth-Atlaxi cooperation? Who has the most to lose if our species prove we can work together successfully? Jerex's scales rippled with realization. The consortium. They've dominated interstellar trade for centuries because they maintain exclusive contracts with individual species. If Earth and Atlaxi technology merge, we'd break their monopoly on quantum communications, Lyra finished. Our hybrid encryption would make their control of trade routes obsolete. They moved carefully toward the service lift, using Jerex's security codes to override the lockdown. As they descended, Lyra found herself studying his profile in the dim light. Despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, she felt drawn to his alien beauty, the way his scales expressed emotions with such subtle complexity. You're staring, Ambassador, he noted, his harmonics carrying a hint of amusement. Just admiring your color patterns, she replied with a small smile. They're particularly striking in emergency lighting. His scales shifted through shades she'd never seen before, and she wondered if she'd just witnessed the Atlaxi equivalent of a blush. Before either could speak further, the lift shuddered to a halt. They've detected us, Jerex said, his scales flooding with alert patterns. The hub is just through the maintenance tunnels, but they'll be waiting. Lyra checked her weapons charge. How many? At least 6 biosignatures. Their stealth tech can't hide body heat from Atlaxi perception. He turned to her, his expression serious. This is your last chance to follow evacuation protocols, Ambassador. What we're about to do goes far beyond bending diplomatic rules. Jerex, she said softly, using his name without his title for the first time. "I think we both know we've moved beyond simple diplomatic relations." His scales rippled with intense colors, and he reached out to touch her face with scaled fingers. "Your species' capacity for adaptation continues to fascinate me. Most humans would find my appearance too alien for such personal considerations." "Most humans," she replied, leaning slightly into his touch, "haven't had the chance to learn your color language, to see the beauty in how you express emotions." She smiled. "Though I admit, I'm still learning to interpret some of your patterns." "Then let me be clear," he said, his scales shifting to deep, rich colors she'd never seen before. The meaning was unmistakable, even without understanding the specific patterns. His face moved closer to hers, and Lyra found herself rising slightly on her toes to meet him. The kiss was unlike anything she'd experienced. His scaled lips were warm and surprisingly soft, and she could feel the subtle vibration of his harmonics passing between them. For a moment, the danger around them faded away, replaced by the simple wonder of two different species finding unexpected connection. A distant explosion brought them back to reality. Jerex pulled back slightly, his scales still shimmering with emotion. "We should probably deal with the insurgents before pursuing this particular diplomatic exchange further." "Agreed," Lyra said, trying to slow her heartbeat. "Though I think we'll need to have a lengthy discussion about interspecies relations later." They forced the lift doors open, revealing the maintenance tunnels. Ahead lay the quantum communications hub, where the consortium's agents were even now attempting to steal the future of Earth-Atlaxi cooperation. But they had underestimated the determination of two people who had found something worth fighting for beyond simple diplomatic protocol. "Ready to make diplomatic history?" Lyra asked, checking her weapon one final time. Jerex's scales shifted to their most brilliant battle patterns, and she could have sworn she saw him smile. "With you, Ambassador, I suspect we already have." Together, they moved into the tunnels, ready to face whatever waited ahead. They had started this day as suspicious allies, forced together by circumstance. Now, they advanced as partners, bound by something deeper than duty or protocol. A connection that might just change the future of human-alien relations forever. The quantum communications hub hummed with energy, its banks of servers casting blue light across the intruders' stealth suits. Lyra and Jerex moved silently through the maintenance shaft overlooking the main chamber, watching as the consortium agents worked to decrypt the diplomatic database. "Their quantum intrusion programs are incredibly sophisticated," Lyra whispered, studying the data streams on her tablet. "They're not just trying to steal our encryption. They're attempting to introduce subtle flaws into all Earth-Atlaxi joint projects." Jerex's scales rippled with anger, though his voice remained controlled. "Sabotaging years of cooperation, making it appear that our species are fundamentally incompatible." "Well," Lyra said with a slight smile, "I'd say we've thoroughly disproven that theory." She squeezed his scaled hand briefly, ready to show them how compatible our species can be. His scales flushed with affectionate determination. "Lead the way, Ambassador." They split up, using the maintenance shafts to position themselves on opposite sides of the hub. Lyra activated the modified data crystal, now reprogrammed to interface with the embassy systems. On her signal, Jerex would trigger the emergency containment protocols, trapping the intruders inside their own hack. The lead agent, tall and elegant in expensive stealth gear, spoke quietly to his team. 5 more minutes until the data corruption is complete. Once it's done, every attempted collaboration between humans and Atlaxi will fail spectacularly." "I wouldn't be so sure about that," Lyra called out, making herself visible on the upper walkway. All weapons turned toward her. "Some of us are quite good at working together." The agent laughed. "One human diplomat against 6 trained operatives. Even with your little romance with the Atlaxi security chief." "Oh yes, we know all about that. You can't possibly think you'll stop us." "Romance." Lyra pretended to consider this. I suppose that's one way to describe it. I prefer to think of it as a practical demonstration of interspecies cooperation. Speaking of which, Jarex's voice rang out from the shadows, his harmonics carrying commanding frequencies that made the human agents wince. Now, Ambassador. Lyra activated the crystal as Jarex triggered the containment field. The hub's quantum matrices reversed, turning the consortium's own intrusion programs back against their systems. Sparks flew from their stealth suits as the technology overloaded. The lead agent recovered first, firing his weapon at Lyra's position. She dove for cover, returning fire with precise shots that drove him back. Below, Jarex engaged two agents in close combat, his scales shifting through battle patterns that seemed to disorient his opponents. "Their suits are failing," Lyra called out, noting the flickering stealth fields. "The quantum feedback is disrupting their tech." "Fascinating," Jarex replied, his scales bright with excitement as he disabled another agent. "We'll have to include that in our report on interspecies tactical cooperation." The lead agent, realizing his mission was failing, triggered something on his wrist computer. "If we can't prevent your species from cooperating, we'll ensure no one trusts either of you again." The hub's servers began to whine, building toward overload. Lyra's eyes widened as she read the energy signatures. "He's trying to destroy the entire diplomatic database. If it looks like Earth and Atlaxi technology caused this, the resulting diplomatic crisis would set our species relations back decades." Jarex finished, his scales pulsing with urgent patterns. "We have less than 2 minutes before catastrophic failure." Lyra vaulted over the railing, landing beside him. "The crystal. If we interface it directly with the main quantum core, my encryption combined with your biological quantum patterns might be able to contain the overload. That would require both of us to be in direct contact with the core when it peaks," he said, his scales showing concern. "The energy discharge could kill us, yes." She met his multifaceted eyes. "But we've already proven that humans and Atlaxi work better together than apart. Shall we make it official?" His scales rippled with deep emotion as he took her hand. Together, they raced to the central core, even as the other agents fled the impending explosion. The crystal interface hummed with power as they pressed their hands against it. Lyra's human DNA and Jarex's quantum-sensitive scales, creating the unique biological circuit. The core's energy peaked, surging through them both. Lyra gasped at the sensation. It was like being connected directly to Jarex's consciousness, feeling the complex harmonics of his thoughts. His scales blazed with colors she'd never seen before, patterns that spoke of devotion, trust, and something deeper. The overload reached its crescendo, but instead of destroying the database, the energy channeled through their connected forms, stabilizing into new patterns. When the surge passed, they found themselves standing in a transformed hub, its systems now operating on principles that were neither purely human nor Atlaxi, but something new entirely. "It appears," Lyra said weakly, still holding his hand, "that we've just invented an entirely new form of quantum computing." "Among other things," Jarex replied, his scales still shimmering with the aftermath of their connection. "I believe we've also demonstrated rather definitively that our species are far more compatible than anyone suspected." Embassy security finally arrived, led by a very confused Ambassador Richards. He took in the scene: the disabled consortium agents, the transformed hub, and the human diplomat still holding hands with the Atlaxi security chief. "Ambassador Novak," he said carefully, "I'm going to need a very detailed explanation for all of this." "Of course, sir," Lyra replied, not releasing Jarex's hand. "Though I should warn you, it's going to require updating quite a few diplomatic protocols, particularly those regarding interspecies relations." Jarex's scales rippled with amusement and affection. "Perhaps we should begin with a revision of security screening procedures." "Actually," Lyra smiled, feeling the lingering connection between them, "I think those worked out rather well." In the days that followed, As Earth and Atlaxi diplomats struggled to understand the implications of what had happened in the hub, Lyra and Jerex became living proof of what their species could achieve together. Their forced security screening had led not just to the exposure of a conspiracy, but to technological breakthroughs, strengthened diplomatic ties, and the first officially recognized human-Atlaxi partnership. And if anyone questioned the propriety of their relationship, they simply pointed to the new quantum protocols their unique connection had created, proof that sometimes the best diplomatic solutions came from breaking a few rules and trusting in the possibility of something beyond protocol.